compost. So we have a lot of different ways of dealing with compost at our place. Compost, not compost, kitchen scraps, garden waste, anything organic. You can see for sure that I haven't prettied up the compost for you. It's a 2-bay system, and of course ideally you would have 1 bay that you're adding things to. Well, actually we really should have a 3-bay system. Then we would be adding stuff to one. The other one would be being turned over between the 2 remaining bays until it turns into compost. Usually what we're our aim was to fill up 1 bay and then leave it to compost while we start filling up the other one. By the time the other one's full, the first one's ready. It doesn't seem to work like that for us though. I keep saying we're a bit chaotic, and that's how we are. So what I tend to do is I try and put things into 1 bay. But in the meantime, you see I've got a shovel there. I just shovel out compost from the bottom. So it works for me. I've also mentioned before that we chuck anything into the compost that was once living. That includes, you can see I've got woolen curtains there and an old feather doona, cardboard boxes. There's shirts and, denim jeans and all sorts of stuff there. This is also where we put all of our garden scraps, except for really weedy things. So if I'm, if I was going to prune this bush, it would all go in there. So this is a long-term prospect. I don't expect anything quick to happen here. It just sits there and gets eaten by worms, and eventually we dig it out the bottom and put it on the garden. But there's a bunch of other ways we compost, so I'll show you them as well. So this is the second way we compost. This is for household organic waste, and I should say that doesn't just mean food scraps. It means food scraps, which is things minus the stuff we've given to the chooks, but it also means tissues, bits and pieces of paper or kitchen towel that we've used to wipe the oil off a pan, or we use bamboo and cotton buds, so we chuck them in here too. Anything pretty much that was once living. Big bits I put back in that compost bay that I said, like if I had an old straw hat, that would go in the compost bay. This is for smaller bits, plus all the kitchen scraps that we haven't given to the chooks. And this one is actually, it's sort of at its resting point, and I've put a whole lot of mushroom compost in the top. So I get that from a local organic mushroom grower just by the bed, and chuck that in as a nice filler. The worms love it. I don't know if you can see, but there's quite a lot of worms around, and this will just sit until we have a look and decide that it's ready. So we've got a couple of bins like that, and we're always using them. They're a constant work in progress. If anything, we'd probably like to have a third one. More compost. So this one's a little bit different than the black bins. It's called a green cone, and I wanted to try it out. I'd heard a bit about it. The way it works is that you dig a hole into the ground for an underneath section. It's a bit hard to see here, but it's like a laundry basket at the bottom. So the idea is that apart from those little holes that are dug into the ground, nothing can get in there, so no rats or mice. And the other thing about it is that underneath this green part, there's a gap and then an inner black cone. So the idea is that this always has to be put somewhere in the sun, and the sun hits the sun cone, the green cone, heats it up, and the hot air swirls around the walls, which heats up your compost and helps it decompose. This one's also at a final stage, so I added some mushroom compost to that as well, and that was actually right up to the lid before, and it's already sinking down. So that you'll find that happens. You just leave it for a while, and that will probably sink down another foot, and then I can keep putting stuff in it. And this is the final compost system that I wanted to show you. So I've said before, kitchen scraps and small organic things we put into our black bins and the green cone. Then food, kitchen scraps that the chooks can eat go there. Anything that's big or branches of things that we've pruned goes in the bays. But the one thing that's left over is weedy things. So I'm talking about blackberries that are coming up where you don't want them, or clover, or oxalis, onion weed, that sort of thing. Things that, or even bad grasses, cooch and things like that that are difficult to get rid of. If I'm ever digging up something like that or weeding it out of the garden, I don't want it in the compost because I don't want to spread it. Instead, I make weed tea. So this happens a couple of times a year when I do my major weeding, and basically it just means that I pour buckets of weeds into these bins. I've got, I think, 4 or 5 scattered around the yard. I pour them in there, I fill them, cover it with water. I don't know if you can see that, but it just rots everything, kills the weeds. Goodness, you can see it's a pretty living environment down there, and I can also tell you it's very smelly. But this gets rid of the weeds after about 3 months. It's rotted down enough that is safe to put back into the garden or on the compost, and it won't spread the weeds. And I think that's a really clever way of getting rid of stuff that you don't want to spread and making it a nutrient instead. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of water in that bucket. Usually I get a pitchfork and just get all the solid materials out. Usually I'll just put them in a compost, and they help the composting process because there are so many, microorganisms growing in there. And then I bucket out the rest of the liquid. Technically you're meant to water it down, a bit like wormweed, but me being me, I just chuck it around the garden. With a bucket, I just walk everywhere and chuck it everywhere, and then I give the garden a really good water, and I figure that sort of dilutes it a bit. But so those are all our composting methods.